Hey, have you ever made a mistake before? Maybe like a really, really big one. If not, don't worry. I've made plenty, and today I'm going to share two that were good doozies with you, and then I'm going to share a quick story that's not so real, but it'll get a point across. So, first mistake and story I'm going to share with you today is my first interview after having my first major job in my career. So I finished college and got in a company, and that company was going great. Absolutely loved the people, loved the company. Worked it for 7 years, and then at the end of the 7 years, the company decided to sell itself and merge it with another company. And needless to say, I loved the company. I loved what we were doing, but I was not a fan of that merge. Not at all. Didn't feel like it was the right decision. Didn't feel like it was the right company to be merging with, any of that. But didn't feel like I had any influence that could stop the thing from happening. So you may have gone through this. Merges happen all the time. If you're in work for very long, chances are you'll be through something like this. So we talked about it. We started figuring out, hey, this is really going to happen. And then one day I showed up for work, and there was the CEO and the president of the new company. And they sat down and they said, we're going to interview everyone here at this company to see who's going to stay on with us. So if you've ever had that experience before, it's an interesting experience. I never had. I hadn't really had many interviews in my life. That job had lined up without an interview. And so I wasn't the most brushed up on interviews, and I was mad and I was upset. So I went in there, sat down, let them know my disdain. Not verbally, but I'm sure I walked in that room. They're like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" They sat down and they asked me what I could do for the company, and I couldn't think of anything. And they asked where I think this company could go together and big things that could happen. I couldn't think of anything. They asked what I did for the company. I told them kind of what I'd done for the company. And that was about the extent of the interview. I remember one of the guys, the president, was like asking me questions, and it was like he's trying to pull out of me different answers, trying to work with me, but I was not in the frame of mind to do it, to really give anything. So the interview got done, and the merge ends up happening, and lo and behold, not to any of my own efforts, I ended up being hired onto the new company. I was talking to a good friend of mine who was at that company that I worked with for a long time. And she said, yeah, I had a long conversation with them because my interview was after your interview. And I let them know, man, he's just not really digging what's happening here, but he's a great employee. Trust me, he'll be your best hire ever. And they trusted her, and they brought me on. And to verify that was true, I became friends with the new president over time, got over my issues, and we were talking about that initial interview, and he said, yeah, that was the worst interview I have ever had, and we weren't going to have you. It was lucky that your friend had talked up, and I trusted her so much to bring you on, and I'm glad I did, but that was the worst interview ever. I didn't really tell that story with anyone. I didn't really want anyone to ever know that story. It was a part of my life, and maybe you've had things like this that have happened, a part of my life that I wanted to neatly wrap up, bury it in the backyard like a dead body, bury it, cover it, and hope no one ever finds it ever. Not that I have dead bodies in my backyard, but I didn't want anyone to pull that one up. And I never, and I tried to ignore. I didn't think of it very much. I was like, okay, mistake. It's in the past. Moving forward with this job, and we worked for that job, and I moved forward. Story number two. Story number two was probably about how much longer? Maybe 7 years, 5 years, somewhere around there. No. This was a different one. Let me think. Different job. So I finished that job. Was there for a couple of years. Started a new job. Was there for 5 years. And lo and behold, that job merged with someone else. And it turned out with that job, they weren't looking for anyone to stay on. So I didn't get an interview or anything like that. So I was now looking for work. But I had never interviewed since that first interview. I hadn't needed to. I hadn't really brushed up on my skills or anything like that. And so suddenly I was looking for work again. And I was casting things out there. I had someone work on my resume and get it out there, and lo and behold, within a couple weeks, I had someone bite and said, hey, we'd like to give you an interview. I looked at the job, and it looked like I would be perfect for them. Not just looked like, I knew I'd be a perfect fit for them. I was like, yeah, I'm a great fit for this. This is a good job. I could really help them out. So I thought I got ready for that interview, and I get all dressed. It's an online interview through Zoom, and I do this interview with them, and I think it's going well, and then halfway through I realize it's not going as well as I think, and by the end they say something, and it made me realize that I have missed the entire point of the job. Like I don't know how I did it, but somehow it was like I was interviewing for some different job, and the job they were actually hiring for, I had just missed out on that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But they made a comment right at the end, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think I missed the boat on this. And they're like, well, thanks for interviewing, goodbye, and it clicked off. And I felt like I felt so foolish, so dumb. Here my wife and my kids are coming to the door, and they're like, how did it go? How did it go? And I just felt in the pit of my stomach I screwed it totally up. I didn't even want to tell them what happened. I didn't even want to think about what happened. I had another dead body to go bury in the back. Hopefully no one would ever find it. So those are my two stories. Not great stories. Why am I sharing them with you instead of letting them be in my backyard, never to be exhumed there, right? So the reason why was another story that I came across. Now this story was a different kind of story. It wasn't a true story. It wasn't a life story. It was a story about a man who was, again, working for a company. And this man had been given a project. It was a large project. In fact, it was a large enough project. He'd never done a project of this size before. It involved lots of different people. It involved multiple countries. It involved important deadlines. And it involved a lot of money. In fact, the total budget for this project was $5 million. Well, he was excited to get going, and so he jumped in and started doing this project. And shortly after he moved through the project, he started to realize he did not really know how to do all aspects of this project. And the way he realized that is he'd start to see parts of the project missing deadlines or missing dates or falling apart or not hitting the mark. And over time, this project completely fell apart, and it ended up crashing and burning. And this man was looking at this. He'd never done a project that large before in his life. A $5 million project that just did not turn out the way it needed to turn out. And then his supervisor, manager, called him and set up an appointment for them to go ahead and talk. And he knew what was coming. He totally knew what was coming. He knew he was prepared. He had his tag in his shirt pocket right here. He was going to be prepared to turn it in. He went and sat down at the interview with the supervisor, and the supervisor says, "Tell me about your project." And the man said, I'm so sorry about this project. This is what happened, and this happened, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, and I didn't do this. And if I just would have known that, then this wouldn't have happened. And if I was to do it again, I'd do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. But I didn't know, and it's on me, and I'm so sorry. And the supervisor just looked at him. And the man kind of looked back and didn't know what to do. Reached in his shirt pocket, pulled out his ID badge, handed it across the table. The supervisor looked at it, looked at the man, and pushed it back to him. And the man's like, "Why? What are you doing?" And the supervisor said, "I am not taking your job away from you." The man's like, "Why? I just lost that much money in this project." And the man said, "I just invested $5 million for you to learn, and you just went through and explained to me how to do this project well next time. I can't afford to let you go and lose a $5 million investment in your training." That's the story, right? That's a good story. I thought it was a good story. What if the man didn't go for the interview? What if the man chickened out? What if he didn't think through what he would have done better through the project? What if he just mailed in his badge? That supervisor would get it and the man split, right? he would have never known that he didn't need to be fired. He didn't need to leave, and that the company saw so much in him in what he learned. You know, in life, it's kind of like that. And if you're like me, I heard that story and thought, my goodness, I don't know that I've been looking at life like that man looks at life. I've looked at my mistakes as dead bodies to never be exhumed, right? To never even have anyone realize them. But that story let me know that it's true. What we learn, the money, the gold, the investment, is in the learning of what we learn from our mistakes. But if we never take the time to learn from our mistakes, it's like turning in that badge and walking to the next job, never knowing that one, they invested in us, and two, we could have learned so much more so that the next $5 million project didn't go south. So that goes back to my stories. Story number one, I never ever learned from that project or from that initial interview. I think I told my wife years later how it really went. When they bring it up every once in a while, that president would bring up how bad of an interview was, and I would just kind of laugh and try and move the subject on because I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to admit it, anything like that. But the key is I never learned from it. I never sat down and went, what would I do differently? What could I learn from this? I just didn't. Fast forward to that second interview. I could have walked into that second interview with a treasure trove, a treasure chest of learnings that I could have had. And that could have helped platform me so I wouldn't have made the same mistakes. I don't know that I made the same mistakes in that second interview, but I could have had a major leg up. Well, I'll tell you, at the end of that interview, the second one, when they let me know that they were moving along, thank you very much for interviewing, but we're going to go with someone else. I didn't bury that one in the backyard. I went and talked to my wife. I admitted, I think I screwed this one up. And then I realized that I wanted to learn as much as I could from that interview, that I was going to milk it for all that it was worth. I was going to mine it until there was nothing left but gold in my hands, things that I had learned. Because the next interview, I would not repeat. 2 strikes, I was out. I was already done. There wouldn't be a third strike. And so I wrote in my journal. I sat down and wrote everything I could to think about what would I have done different. And I'll tell you what, the next interview went way better. In fact, in that interview, I sat down with the guy and he asked me what I thought about his company. And I shared all these things that I had learned about his company. I spent time thinking about what they needed. I spent time thinking about the job that they were actually looking for. I was thinking about how I could provide them value. All these things I'd learned from that other interview. And by the time I was halfway through that third interview, the man was just dumbfounded. By the end of that interview, he said, I don't know how we get you in here, but we need you here. It was awesome. It was fun. And it would have never happened if I didn't take the time to learn from my mistakes. So that's my lesson or stories for you today, is to take the time to learn from your mistakes. But here's the thing. Trust me, you don't learn from it if it's buried in the backyard. You got to dig it up. You just have to. You have to look at it. You have to determine what there is to be learned from this. So let me share you how to do it. Fortunately, it doesn't take anything major. You don't have to get a $5 million investment or anything like that. There's just a couple steps that if you take, you will get the gold out of your mistakes and they will help you to grow. In fact, I love this quote from Napoleon Hill. He says this, every adversity, every failure, and every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Again, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. And I'd add to that, but that's only if you plant the seed. That's only if you nourish the seed. That's only if you have identified the seed. If it's buried in the background, you're not doing any of that. So let me share how you do it. Number 1, it's easy to do. It only takes a little bit of time. Easy's, it depends on how big of a mistake it was. There might be a lot to mine through, But again, the more you have to mine through or sift through, the greater the benefit there is in there. I've totally seen that in my life. So here's the steps. Number 1. Step 1 is you get to eat. You get to eat a large slice of humble pie. Now I know for some of us that's really hard to do. We don't want to admit it to ourselves. We definitely don't want to admit it to others. We don't want to admit it to our wife, to our kids, to those people who matter to us. But I'll tell you what, until you admit the mistake you made, it's buried in the backyard. You're not going to get anything from it. So take a big slice of humble pie. Take a big bite of it, and realize it's not as bitter as you thought it was. It's actually quite sweet. Take a bite of humble pie and admit to someone that you love, someone you trust, that you made a mistake. Share it. Get it out on the table. We're not going to be able to do any surgery or operation unless it's on the table and we can examine it. So it's time to get it out, put it on the table, examine it. Your step 1 is to admit that you made a mistake, that you made a doozy, that you were stupid. Whatever it is, you got to admit it. It's okay. You've made mistakes. You've made a lot of them. I've made my fair share. I make them every week. Everyone does. Eat some humble pie so you can get the gold out of your mistakes. Number 1, admit that you made a mistake to someone who you trust. Number 2, choose to laugh rather than swear. Again, choose to laugh rather than swear. Again, choose to laugh instead of swear. Realize that you are not God. You are not perfect. You are going to make mistakes, and you have made mistakes, and it's okay. And you can make big mistakes. Remember the story I had, where it was the worst interview that he had ever had in his, I don't know how many years, 20, 25 years of running companies and interviewing people. That was me. That wasn't you. That was me. It's okay. I survived. Okay? Just laugh at it. Realize it was a mistake, and you didn't know, or you just made a stupid decision, whatever it was. Laugh at it. Number 2, now it's time to roll up your sleeves, and this is where you get to look for what you learned from this. And this is where you find the seed. This is where you mine for gold. This is where you get the good stuff that's going to make sure that you don't make that mistake again. Not only that, it's going to accelerate you so that you can grow way faster than you could without this learning. It works. Roll up your sleeves. You're going to ask yourself this. Number 1, what happened? Look at it as objectively as you can. What happened? What was it? What did it feel like? What's the actual? If you were to sit down and tell someone the details of it, detail out as much as you can. I do this through journaling. I write out, type it out. As you can see with my hands, type it out. Do it. Spend the time. Number 2, what did you learn? This might be the first time you have learned of anything on it, because it may have been out in the backyard buried. You've dug it up. You've written all the details you can remember from it. Then ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Number 3, once you have learned from it and you've sifted through and learned everything you can, tell someone else, or ask yourself, if someone else was going through this, what would you tell them to do? Or if you were to go back in time and prep yourself before this experience, what would you go back and tell yourself to do or not do in that situation? This is where you change it from tragedy to triumph. This is where you help someone else not make the mistake that you made. This is the purpose of this video right here for me. So you don't make the same mistakes I've been making by just burying them in the backyard and never learning a thing. You think through what it is that you would help someone else. You would tell someone else that they don't make the same mistake that you make. And therein is the gold. When you do that, you turn that tragedy into triumph. You turn the mistake into money. I can't come up with any more catchy sayings, but you get the idea. It really does work. It's worked time and time and time and time again for me. Step 4, share what you learned with someone. Share what you learned with 2 or 3 people. Not only will that cement that in your mind, but it allows someone to learn from your mistakes, and it will cement it so that you don't repeat that mistake in the future. So that's it. 4 steps. Now, that didn't take any investment. It didn't take any major pain. It just took Step 1, eating some humble pie and admitting to someone that I trust that I have made a big mistake. Step 2, I'm choosing to laugh about it instead of swear. Step 3, I'm rolling up my sleeves and asking these questions about the mistake. What happened? What did I learn from it? If I was to go back and teach someone else or teach myself what to do or not do, what would I tell them? Once I've done that, I just share that gold of what I would tell someone to do with 1 or 2 other people. And guess what? You done it. You have learned from your mistakes, my friend. You are now equipped to go forward and to triumph in that situation instead of repeat it again and again and again. It really does work. It really, really does work. So I hope from here on out, you can take a little bit more humble pie. I know I've needed to eat it more and more, but I've actually gotten to where I like it. That doesn't taste as bad as I thought. And I take the time week after week, especially as I have big mistakes, to think through it, to process through it, and to find the gold in what I'm doing. Remember that quote from Mr. Napoleon Hill. Every adversity, every failure, and every heartache carries with it the seed of an equivalent, or greater benefit. It really is true, my friend. It really is true. It will accelerate you forward faster than anything else because you will understand that through and through. You know that mistake. You've analyzed it. You've learned from it. You're not doing it again, and you know how to get around it and how to build past it. If you liked that principle and liked the videos, go ahead and hit the notification bell on YouTube there. You'll get notification when I add other videos. This is what I do, trying to help people become more powerful in their lives, more powerful in their careers, more powerful in their families. Thanks for watching.